G'day Australia, it is so good to be back on the telly, not just yelling at the telly, but yelling through it and agreeing with you about how crazy this world has been and is each and every night. Now, politicians back in Canberra, as you know, will also have a discussion about the travel routes. Now, remember, the Minister for Freebies, we haven't forgotten her. We'll tell you a little more detail that others have moved on beyond, but I will get back to it because I've been asked plenty about it over summer. And Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price on this show, her first appearance of 2026. Welcome to a new show that's the same show that's the show you've always loved. You know the deal.
From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Well, forgive me, I got a bit excited about the new show bit. Well, we've actually got a slightly new surroundings. I will show you now what I have been doing over summer, and that has been we've been cleaning up the man cave. We've sort of grown up a little bit. We've classed up the joint. We've got a new carpenter or two in. So beautiful new detail. And, yeah, this is our home base each and every night. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, let us get to the obvious today, which has been the events that have been taking place in Canberra today. Most politicians were able to summon up the obvious courage to speak about the difficulties after Bondi last year. And they had some really lovely things to say. This, in part, is what people other than the Greens had to say.
Adults shielding children they did not know from bullets. Lifeguards using their boards as stretchers to carry the wounded.
To all those who helped in those dark moments, we say thank you. The whole country is grateful for your selflessness.
And so to every single Australian who has lit a candle or checked in on a Jewish community member, a friend, a colleague, I say thank you.
For every person murdered, there are families and friends left behind, a home left quieter, clothes still hanging in wardrobes, photos on walls that will never be updated.
The thing I liked particularly there about Mark Dreyfus, he's the former Attorney General, is that he wasn't playing up to the camera like you see so many of these politicians do. He was speaking very much about the tragedy, and as a Jewish Australian, you can understand how it would affect him and everyone else inside that community. But then there are, of course, the people who kind of want to change the subject. Now, yes, they stand there and they tick the boxes. What happened on December 14, terrible. Our thoughts and prayers to all of the families. And then they go off into little bits of territory and play the greatest hits of their political career. And guess what? Most of them are in the Greens. David Shoebridge is a Green senator from New South Wales, and for some reason he thought the condolence motion was about something other than what actually took place, the terror attack in Bondi at the end of last year.
But we need to remember too that the same hate that was directed against the Jewish community could equally have been directed at other vulnerable parts of our community, at women, at the LGBTIQ community. And we need to respond with that in mind.
But of course it wasn't. Again, how hard is it? If you're going to turn up in Canberra, you don't have to turn up in Canberra. Condolence motion isn't about voting. It's about giving the chance to give a speech. And largely, Shoebridge actually did a reasonable job as a senator from New South Wales and making references to the Bondi community. But then we're off into all of the alphabet club, or pretending that women are vulnerable groups in the society as opposed to the future is female and, you know, his own party leader, all the rest of it, right? Then, of course, there's Sarah Hanson-Young. Now, Sarah Hanson-Young, of course, unless she's holding up a fish in the parliament, doesn't stand out very much, and I think I can work out why. Because even on days like today, she sort of became the human version of an Instagram post. Thanks, but how's this going to help?
The horrors of December 14 must be a turning point to unite our country, to overcome the fear, the hatred, to reject those who feed upon it. Because it is division they are after. The extremists want us divided. The terrorists want us full of hate, full of fear. We must beat them with love, compassion and unity for our community.
Again, okay, but confronting radical Islam requires not just love focus. But what about Nick McKim, Green Senator from Tasmania? Now, this is a disgrace. Now, the other ones, they're a bit weird. This is just a disgrace. Again, trying to take what this event is about. Parliament is only back for one reason and one reason only. Today, condolence motion. Tomorrow, some legal solutions, including a question mark about just how much a solution things like changing gun laws are. But he decided to, well, get ahead of the Invasion Day discussion in a few days' time.
But Jewish Australians won't be safe from the scourge of anti-Semitism until Muslim Australians are safe from the scourge of Islamophobia. And neither will be safe until all Australians are safe from racism and from religious intolerance. Until we reckon with intolerance and discrimination based on any attributes. And until we reckon with the brutality and the underlying violence of the colonisation of this continent based on the lie of terra nullius, because truly no one is safe until we are all safe, just as no one is free until everyone is free.
And congratulations to Mrs. Kafoops in Bendigo. You just won Greens Bingo. LGBT, Islamophobia and the Indigenous community. Greens Bingo, that they somehow were able to shove into a day that was supposedly, and by the majority, a focus in and around what took place in Bondi. Now, in terms of the Prime Minister and what he had to say, this in part was what he said during his moment in the sun. Now, remember, he has come out of a shocking summer, one where he didn't just drop the ball, he dropped the ball, he fell over the ball, he bought a banana just to take the banana out and trip over the banana skin. He had a terrible summer. So he's now trying to create a whole bunch of staged events with planned speeches, home turf, if you will, to be able to look like the national leader he has not been, well, arguably for years, definitely for months, and most certainly for the past few weeks.
Terrorists, inspired by ISIS, murdered our citizens on our soil.
Now, that's as close as he got to saying what was actually going on here, because, of course, the poison of radical Islam, which is different than Islam, radical Islam, that poison the head, poison the heart, that is not the faith that is practiced by billions of people around the world. Instead, it is a bastardisation of it, which is used to radicalise thousands around the world, and wait till I tell you the numbers about here at home. But the truth is, on a day where we are talking about people who flew an ISIS flag, and what is ISIS stripped in, apart from the blood of the infidel, it is, of course, that of radical Islam. Prime Minister couldn't talk about that, so we're going to pretend that somehow there's a disconnect between radical Islam and ISIS. Thankfully, this was not something that worried other MPs today.
Radical Islamist extremism.
It is extremist, radical Islamic.
We have a radical Islamic ideological problem in this country.
Good, middle, stump, all of them. Here's the deal. We can pretend that if we just throw more love in the air, then everything will be okay. In many ways, the tolerance and the love behind the tolerance has been abused by people who do not view this as a fair playing field, who do not respect the roles of other people, who do not feel even the bastardised version of their faith, let alone any faith or no faith, who have very different views about all of those different groups that the Greens have had to mention. So what must be confronted in A1 priority is radical Islam. Are there a whole bunch of other things, including, yes, fringe nutters that parade around as neo-Nazis? You bet, and I'll be in the front line of those wanting to take those on. But today is a day to talk about what happened in Bondi and about the role of radical Islam potentially in that situation. Of course, matters before the courts, so there's only so far we can push. But one of the reasons why the Prime Minister has just had this shocker of a summer is because, remember, His plan was to lay some flowers early in the morning, bugger off from Bondi, talk about guns, change the national conversation about that, and hope that it was a conversation just held here on Sky News about the role of the Jewish community, about how they had felt abandoned by this government with its sort of whataboutism, its 6-7 attitude towards important matters, where, of course, there's no difference between Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. And then the Greens again add LGBT and then Indigenous issues on top of it. Come on. ASIO has been telling us there is a focus here. It's time to take that focus. Well, as you know, the Prime Minister wanted to have a nice little inquiry where he could pick the person. It could all happen behind closed doors. And if the report was even mildly going to be critical of the way that he has run the country over the past couple of years, we'd never see the light of day. Or if it did, just like every other document the government doesn't want us to see, black line, black line, black line, black line, black line. That's exactly what has happened when it came to COVID. We didn't get a Royal Commission. We should have, to make sure there's no more lockdowns, to make sure that people are not kept away from the people that they love when they are dying. But no. This all happened behind the closed door with a predetermined 2 out of 3 people agreeing with everything that had happened. His plan was for a bloke who used to work from government to comment on government about the failures of government, but again, keep it all away. People wanted a Royal Commission. Why? Because they wanted out in the open, before the television cameras, on the lights, with the microphones turned on. Who knew what, who knew when, and who failed. But the Prime Minister thought that this was going to be a one-day wonder of a story, so no Royal Commission for you.
The government is committed to making sure that we can't wait years for answers. We need to get on with any changes that are required.
Well, and then he realised that Australia was ready to give him a kick in the backside. So guess what? Each Way Albo did exactly the opposite.
It's clear to me that a Royal Commission is essential. Today I announced that I will be recommending to the Governor-General in an Executive Council meeting that will be held tomorrow that a Royal Commission on anti-Semitism and social cohesion be established.
I said it before this election, I said it before the last election, and that remains truer than ever, each way Albo. You can't trust this bloke because the line in the sand today becomes the sandcastle built over it tomorrow. Even more important than the speeches that took place today was some information that we got today. Now, I don't know whether this information was planned to come out today or was deliberately squeezed out today, hoping that we'd all be distracted by the speeches, serious, silly and otherwise. But the truth is that Australia has got more than one problem when it comes to radical Islam and more than one problem when it comes to terrorism. Tony Burke and Home Affairs, made it clear today that more than 200 terrorists operate amongst us. Tony Burke said, pushing them to the fridges does not eliminate the fact that they have hateful views from individuals, and when those individuals are on visas, I've been cancelling them and kicking them out. But for most of these people, they're Australian citizens. And that's the truly frightening bit. That's the bit that is different than the days after 9/11, 25 years ago. That we have got a cohort of people who, for some reason, their parents have played by the rules, but for some reason, the generation that has been most valued by a community trying to say, well, OK, whatever's happened with the parents, let's take care of the kids, educated in Australian schools, brought up in an Australian way, yet still, according to Home Affairs, hundreds of people can't be booted out. Why? Because they are born here. The problem is here and is amongst us and is worth discussing. Hit the nail on the head. Because in plain sight, there's been some weirdness on the fringes of how Islam is discussed in this country. Now, you may remember a prayer hall that we've talked about a lot of recent weeks and months. It was a prayer hall in the city of Bankstown in the west of Sydney. This prayer hall had a link to a preacher, and some of the things being said inside this prayer hall have been taken note, not just by the community but also by authorities. Well, that particular venue has now been shut down. Now, it has been shut down because 15 people lost their lives in Bondi, and there was a new focus from the New South Wales government. Again, nice and clear for the lawyers that might be half listening. I'm not suggesting a direct link, obviously, between the prayer hall, anyone involved in it, and the shooting. But this is worth noting from Channel 7 News.
An unassuming brick building at Bankstown reportedly harbouring hate. The illegal prayer hall hosted by controversial cleric Wissam Haddad.
Towards the end of times when the Muslims will be fighting the Jews.
The New South Wales government backing council calls to shut it down. The building only permitted to house a medical centre.
This is an important change, not just for that community, but for New South Wales. And I want to make it clear, it's not the end of the matter.
See, this is the bit that annoys me. This particular prayer hall and this particular preacher are not new. A documentary at the end of 2024 was done by Jonathan Lee. It was aired on this network. I'll let you see what he had to say specifically about the person at the head of this hall, which has now been closed down. But again, this was on the public airwaves, picked up in the newspapers, echoed on the internet for at least 13, 14 months.
For the last 4 weeks, we've been trying to interview an outspoken Muslim leader who insists that there is no place for Islam in Australia's democracy. We've met him face to face, and there's been more than a dozen phone and text conversations just to get us to this point. He won't go on camera, but he has agreed to a phone call that we can record.
Now, I suggest you go and have a look. Now, again, for the lawyers that are half listening, I'm not suggesting about radical preaching with this particular person, but what I am saying is that Bankstown Council turned around and shut this joint down. But only after what happened in Bondi. The centre, the cleric, have been known for a long time. In fact, apparently for the best part of a few years, this thing was operating in plain sight when the actual approval was only given for it, as you heard, to be a medical centre. Now, since the New South Wales government has turned around and has changed some of the powers to be able to shut down places, and this works everything from a vape shop through to buildings like this. If you've got approval to be this, but you're really doing that, well, guess what? You're going to go. But I couldn't believe that there were people from this council who wanted a little bit of a gold star because they finally shut this thing down after Bondi. Well, where was it after the documentary? Where was it after the numerous news stories in and around this? Just crazy. Now, as for what's happening in Canberra tonight, ahead of tomorrow, there apparently is passionate meetings of Labor MPs, Liberal MPs, Nats as well, and they are trying to work out what areas of compromise there may, and I just mean may, be when it comes to the proposed anti-hate laws, which are being discussed by the Prime Minister and by Susan Lee. Here's the latest that we know tonight.
The Prime Minister has removed a provision which would allow tougher laws around racial vilification in an effort to appease the other political parties. He has also revealed the strengthening of gun laws will be separated from the bill and introduced to Parliament on its own, as requested by the Greens.
Now, before I get to this next bit, may I explain how we're going to move around the brand new and improved Man Cave, including when you see me standing next to a screen like this, I'm about to show you some data, and you know how I likes me some numbers. Well, one thing that has become very clear in terms of the data is that Australia was not impressed by the Prime Minister in relation to all things Bondi. Again, am I making this up? No. The headline today was that support for the Prime Minister has slumped directly. Now, if you have a look at this poll number, I want to show you here this graph. Pay attention to, blue line being Susan Lee, red line being, old mate Anthony Albanese. As you can see, relatively unpopular way back when. And of course, this was in and around cost of living, etc. was all of this. Well, basically, he's exactly back to the worst of cost of living, despite the fact that in December of last year, as you can see, nice and high. He's lost 25 points in only a few weeks' time. And it is about Bondi. Again, have a look here where you can see the yellow here. That is whether people supported or didn't support when it came to the actions of that particular leader when it came to Bondi. 53% of people happy with what Susan Lee had to say. About the same number of people who vote Labor was actually there when it came to Anthony Albanese. Now, one thing that is really worth noting here is that the big and major story of all of this is that One Nation has had a huge surge in all of the polls. It's not just the Prime Minister copying the black eye, but it is a huge surge in support for One Nation. Now, One Nation has been able to absolutely thump its way through. Why? Because, as you can have a look at here, there was an opinion poll which came out about a week ago that I've got to say I was a little bit sceptical of. It was one that showed that they'd trebled the number of people who were on their side, trebled the number. In fact, if we can show you the graphic here, where, as you can see, the small amount of orange, which you're about to see here, that was the election last year, and then you can see a massive jump there to a whole lot higher post what happened when it came to Bondi. You can see it nice and clear there on your screen. Well, that has been confirmed today, and it has been confirmed by the news poll. And the news poll primary, which shows that the opposition is now behind One Nation. Can you believe, as we've been looking at this all the way through, where 22 beats 21, that is an extraordinary result, the highest ever for One Nation. Now, on this show, I think all the way back since, 2016, when Pauline Hanson was trying to make her way into the Senate, we were talking to her then. We talked to her after she got into the Senate in 2016. We talked with plenty of others at, say, the 2019, 22 and 25 elections, and not just when the polls come out, but about what they have to say. You will see plenty of people on and off the air here from One Nation. Why? Because people are starting to back their ideas, and they do have serious ideas. Once you break down also the Resolve poll, which came out today, this one via the 9 newspapers, you can again see another giant surge. Their vote was 6% of the federal election. We're now talking, more than a double. Once you actually have a look at this state by state, it's an even more interesting story. Why? Because all of these numbers here at, say, 20%, 19, 17 and 16, every single one of those results, if it became an election, would result in a doubling in the number of senators that they have in the parliament. That's extraordinary. They would be able to have another one in New South Wales, another one in Queensland, or should I say Pauline Hanson would get most likely re-elected there. Victoria would produce a senator. The rest of the country, including places like Tasmania, where, remember, 14% of the vote in Tasmania is a shorter and smaller number of people than it is, say, in New South Wales, meaning One Nation could be in a box seat to go even further than doubling its numbers in the Senate. No wonder Pauline was happy today.
I want to thank the Australian people for their support and confidence. They are now advocating for One Nation. This is the first poll in Australia's history that another party is polling higher than one of the major parties.
Now, away from polling, away from matters to do with Bondi, we have not forgotten about the travel routes. The Minister for Freebies, Annika Wells, the Minister for Sports and Communications, the one who can be joined at the hip by the Prime Minister because she's one of the chosen few. Well, as you know, just before Bondi, this was the biggest story in the country. Understandably and appropriately, people stopped talking about it. But just to remind everyone who needs any reminding, and I know you don't, but just in case somebody's watching us online in a couple of weeks' time, Annika Wells is the Sports Minister who charged taxpayers thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for her to be able to fly around and become Australia's #1 sporting fan, even getting down and dirty with the streamers at grand finals, let alone $100,000 to go to New York, let alone her husband coming along to all of those different events. And remember, at the time she said she followed all the rules, which meant, it's your problem if you don't like it.
I've abided by the rules the whole time I've been.
I've followed the rules. Follow the rules is to follow the rules, always continue to follow them. I have followed the rules, followed the guidelines so far.
I love that. I also love that the Prime Minister said he couldn't possibly change the rules because it's independent.
Well, these are rules that have been set for some period of time. They're rules that are in place in terms of family reunion.
But then, of course, he changed the rules because, he always could.
We have recommended a number of changes as a result of the consideration by the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority.
Well, guess something that we learned about today? Well, We'll learn a little more detail here about what the changes were. Now, firstly, here are the changes as announced by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has announced that he wants to force families of politicians to fly economy class and limit the use of entitlement to flying to or from Canberra or the MP's local area. Partners will only be able to claim travel for events they were officially invited to. Well, technically, wouldn't that be a Minister for Freebies +1 plus guest, or his name gets written down? Means, guess what? This was all about making it look like there was a change. Albanese explained the changes would remove access to Australia-wide family reunion, travel and restrict to Canberra and within Parliament's local area or an electorate in a senator's case. And, of course, that's an entire state. Well, we check back in here and guess what? Almost all of the family reunion flights that Sports Minister Annika Wells charged the taxpayer since she became a minister would still be allowed under the Albanese proposal of changes when it came to the rules and expenses. Is anyone truly surprised that this is the case? That they say they're going to deal with something, but they don't really deal with it. They just do something to put out a little political fire. Now, bigger news events ended up doing so. But in relation to the Prime Minister's fix here, that he said he couldn't do a fix, ends up being not a fix at all. With the giant loophole being, well, of course you can fly to cricket in Perth, just as long as he gets invited too. How ridiculous. Honestly and truly ridiculous.